On September 26th, Jiffy Jeff and I went to Glensheen Mansion in Duluth, Minnesota. Built between 1905 and 1908, the 39-room mansion was home to Chester Cogden, a lawyer for the mining companies, and his wife Clara and their 6 children. We started the self-guided tour at the carriage house, the fanciest carriage house I've ever seen. The Glensheen estate was designed to be self-sufficient. There was a vegetable garden, a greenhouse, an orchard, a cow barn, and a water reservoir. Fancy, fancy. Isn't it? They got tile walls. You know, usually barns have wood walls. Place where they could milk right here. And didn't they say this is cork? Yeah. That's cork. It's soft. It's made from cork, so the cows get the best underneath their feet. Oh, that's a happy cow. This is where the horses were. And again, cork floor. And porcelain watering bowls on the wall. And look at this is brass. This man made his money quite well on being a lawyer, and he came from nothing. He did not come from a wealthy family. Oh, the harness shop. Next, it was time for us to knock on the beautiful front door and enter the home. We're supposed to go knock on the door. A butler opens the door and guests are treated to all the gorgeous wood, beautiful furniture. It's quite an entrance. And then they're led to the reception room. There's the gold leaf. This comes up really neat. Look at that. That's carved out of stone. That's not glass.
Oh,
it is a little dark, isn't it? All this woodwork makes it dark. Chester Cogden had a smoking room for his gentlemen guests. These light switches are something else. Then we enter the grand living room, and it is quite grand, very large. The Cogdens did enjoy entertaining. Look at that marble. It's beautiful. Ooh, that's a real library table, all right. That bird looks, oh, that poor bird. Ooh, there's a water fountain out front. And then, of course, that's looking out the library window to Lake Superior. How neat. I wonder if that's somebody's family member there in the corner.
I think that's the portraits of them. Each one, see? There's one
That's,
over there, one over there.
But they look older than...
The portraits of Chester and Clara were created by a local artist who shows them in their mid-50s.
Oh. Well, it's the bonnet that doesn't look right. By all accounts, Clara and Chester were good parents. Unfortunately, in the late 70s, their daughter Elizabeth, now an elderly woman, and her nurse were murdered in the home. Her nurse was found on the landing's bench, bludgeoned by a candlestick. Pause here and see the original Cogden family members who lived in this house when it was first built. The Cogdens were a gracious and generous family by all accounts, close too, and they highly valued education for themselves and for their children. Elizabeth was their second youngest child, and she never married. In fact, she actually never really left home, for she lived till her last breath in this house at the age of 83, outlasting all her brothers and sisters. Not marrying did not stop Elizabeth from having children. In her late 30s, she adopted 2 daughters. In 1932, she adopted Marjorie, and in 1935, she adopted Jennifer. Unfortunately, it was Marjorie who would become the black sheep of the family. She constantly borrowed money and ended up marrying numerous times, but that's the least of it. Marjorie had mental health issues. While still a child, she was diagnosed as a sociopath after starting a fire, and she was put into institutions. For a time, she appeared to have improved. She got married to Dick Leroy, and together they had 7 children. Marjorie was a very active mother who loved spoiling her children on luxuries, so much so the family was constantly in financial difficulty. Marjorie had no sense when it came to spending money. Her behavior appeared to worsen after each birth of a child, and she became a very proficient liar. So proficient, it was impossible to tell what was a lie and what was the truth. Dick could no longer take it and divorced her. And Marjorie, well, she continued to spiral out of control, becoming more and more erratic, especially in how she spent money. She married Roger Caldwell, and things really began to spiral out of control. Marjorie was going through her money like water and constantly going to her mother to ask for more money. Finally, her mother Elizabeth had had enough. But Marjorie hadn't had enough, especially enough of her mother's money. There was so much she still wanted to buy. Elizabeth was now 83 years old. She had nurses around the clock, having suffered a stroke 10 years ago that had left her partially paralyzed on one side. Marjorie was ready for her mother to go ahead and die so she could get her inheritance. That's where her second husband, Roger, comes back into the picture. Somehow or other, those two came up with a plan. A very ill-prepared plan, but a plan no less, to get rid of Marjorie's mother, Elizabeth, a very kind lady who had just had enough of her troubles with her daughter Marjorie. Promising Roger $2.5 million of her $8 million inheritance, she convinced Roger to commit the evil deed. Roger left Marjorie in Colorado, where they were living at the time, and flew to Minnesota, then drove to Duluth, where he committed the crime. And it was such a messy crime. Or rather, I should say, murder. A messy murder. On June 27th, 1977, Elizabeth Congdon and her nurse, Velma Patilla, were found murdered. Velma had been bludgeoned to death by a brass candlestick, her jaw brutally broken. She lay on the landing between the first and the second floor, with the candlestick, the weapon of her demise, on the floor beside her. There was blood all around in pools. At the top of the stairs, directly to the right, was a room that is in this video called Helen's room. It had become Elizabeth's room in her later years, and that is where Elizabeth's body had been found. A blood-specked satin pillow atop her face. The covers had been kicked down during the struggle, for indeed there had been a struggle. Had Elizabeth recognized her murderer before she'd been so brutally suffocated to death? Valuable objects and jewelry had been taken from her room, the very objects that were promised to Marjorie upon her death. What an interesting coincidence, don't you agree? It wasn't long before the police put the finger on Roger, and he did go to trial and end up in prison for murder. He even confessed to the murders in 1983, but he did commit suicide years later, and he said he didn't do it. DNA evidence says otherwise quite strongly. Marjorie got away scot-free. She had a very good lawyer, but that didn't stop more trouble in the years to come when she got sent to prison for insurance fraud and arson, of course. Not her first arson either. Marjorie's third husband, who she was married to bigamously, died very suspiciously. And again, Marjorie was arrested in Arizona at an assisted living facility where she was working. She got caught on charges of computer fraud and other counts. She pleaded guilty, but I can tell you that today she's out there somewhere, still alive. She would have turned 90 years old this year, and there's no sign that she's died in the news. Marjorie can be quite charming when she wants to be. She's good at making friends. Her children stopped contacting her a very long time ago, and one of them, Jennifer, has passed on. You may be wondering why I've shared this tale with you as we've gone through a tour of the home, a beautiful home, so lovely, so calming. Well, because life is a paradox. From beautiful things and good parenting, troubled children can grow up and cause mighty big pains for everyone. It cannot be lost on us that the Congdon family has done very good things for the people of Minnesota and other people who come to visit Minnesota. Why, they're the ones who donated the land that begins the start of the North Shore Drive, the beautiful North Shore Drive, going all the way up to the border of Canada. If you become curious to learn more about the Glensheen Mansion and the murders that happened inside its doors, I highly recommend Will to Murder. It's very well written, and there are photos of family members and scenes from the crime. Love all life around you. Be inspired. Be grateful. Birth joy.